This episode of Trifles is made possible by listeners like you who support us on Patreon and Substack. To learn more, go to patreon.com/trifles or trifles.substack.com.
Welcome to Trifles, a weekly podcast about the Sherlock Holmes stories.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Yes, there were 3 gables, 5 orange pips, and a sign of 4, but there are hundreds of other details to pick apart in the stories.
Pray, be precise as to details.
You know the plots, but what about the minutiae? Have you ever stopped to wonder about how much money Holmes actually collected from the Duke of Holderness? Or why Watson constantly had to read the telegrams to him?
You are very inquisitive, Mr. Holmes.
It is my business to know what other people don't know.
Scott Monty and Burt Wolder will have the answers to these questions and more in Trifles.
The game's afoot.
Episode 444, John H. Watson, Word Painter. Well, hello, and welcome to Trifles, the Sherlock Holmes podcast where we look into the minutiae in the Sherlock Holmes stories. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Burt Wolder.
Burt, have you got your palette and brush out?
Oh, I do. And I got my magnifying glass. Am I painting something very small? Is that what I'm doing? Am I painting commas or apostrophes?
Yes, we're painting a podcast on the head of a pin.
Oh, gee, I'm so glad you corrected me. I was trying to, you're going to think this is funny. I was trying to paint a pin on the head of a podcast.
Oh, well, that's your mistake. You've got things upside down and backwards.
It's a lot easier.
Well, get yourself right, folks, because this is the first episode of the month, and that means it is time for us to look at a Morley-Montgomery Award-winning paper. That's right. It's the paper that was judged the best of the year in the Baker Street Journal. This time we're looking at H.C. Potter's John H. Watson Word Painter from volume 26, number 2. That's from June of 1976. It's all about Watson's prose. So this is going to be an interesting one, and I think you'll be interested to learn a little bit more about H.C. Potter himself. So stay tuned. Just a reminder, if you'd like to support the show, you can do that in a couple of ways. We have a presence on Patreon at patreon.com/trifles. And we also have a presence on Substack, trifles.substack.com. For as little as $1 a month, you can become an erstwhile producer of the show. That's right. You help us to put this on, to do the research, to host the files, to do all the things, the bells and whistles that it takes to create a capital K quality program like this. So if you would like to hear more episodes, if you would like to ensure that other like-minded Sherlockians have this same experience, then please help us out by going to Patreon or to Substack. And if you choose not to do either one, that's okay too. But here's what we'd ask you to do instead. Leave us a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you're able to leave reviews where you listen to podcasts. We appreciate your support and you telling other people about how great the show is helps other people find it. So we find ourselves in the 1976 Baker Street Journal, but Bert, I don't know if you are aware of the fascinating background of the author of this particular piece that we're going to look at today.
Oh, yeah, Potter. Well, he was an interesting guy. I mean, from the Sherlockian side, oddly enough, he is a double winner of the Morley-Montgomery Award. He won the Morley-Montgomery Award in 1971, 5 years, I guess, before this one, for reflections on canonical venues and something of the horse. But this is, he turned to Sherlockian doings late in life after he'd retired from his principal career as a film director, among other things. And he was very active in the theater And he is the only Baker Street irregular, I think, unless Nick Meyer has one, with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, Henry Meyer.
How about
Henry
that?
C. Meyer. He directed Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House, and
Great film.
The Farmer's Daughter, and a bunch of pictures from the 30s, things like The Cowboy and the Lady. And he directed The Adventures of Tom Sawyer in 1938. Interesting guy. And during World War II, he was a pilot. He trained Royal Air Force pilots. He was an avid private pilot. And he was also active in the theater. Quite a guy.
Yeah, he returned to New York from Hollywood in 1944, I guess. No, but he still directed films into the 50s. The Miniver Story with Greer Garson and Walter Pidgeon, I guess. But so he brings this wonderful background of story and dialogue, things that he was particularly adept at, to his view of John Watson in this article. And just as an aside here, this 1976 award was titled the Lou D. Feldman Morley-Montgomery Award. I guess because Lou Feldman had passed away, and it was decided to continue the award with a $100 prize being furnished by the Baker Street Irregulars. So kind of in Lou Feldman's memory. I don't think it's known as the Feldman Morley-Montgomery Award anymore. I think it's just the Morley-Montgomery Award, but it was a nice gesture, a little maudlin gesture at the time. So Potter begins that Watson has been the subject of all kinds of papers by Sherlockians, and we know him well from the tip of his badly brushed bowler to the soles of his mud-marred boots. The good companion, the loyal friend, the oft-times obtuse but good-natured bulldog, the perfect alter ego for the master. And Potter says, to my knowledge, I can't help hearing Holmes's cynical whisper, it's all been done before. But there's a facet to the complete Watson which has never been given its just due. I refer to his great skill as, quote, a word painter, end quote, to borrow Martin Dakin's happy phrase. And we've talked about Dakin before in his Sherlock Holmes work, which is, oh goodness, what's the name of Dakin's book now that I'm trying to think about it? Of course, I blank on it.
No, me too.
A Sherlock Holmes commentary, of course, that's it. But I want to pause here to note the idea of painting with words. I saw a documentary. I watched a documentary on HBO or Max or HBO Max, whatever the word of the week is, about David McCullough. It's a great documentary about the historian David McCullough, and it was called Painting with Words. And it was particularly interesting because McCullough himself dabbled in watercolors, but he also is someone who worked with words. And I think as we think about Watson as a master craftsman, as an artist of sorts, his palette is the page, and or his palette are words, and his canvas is the page. And that is clearly what Potter is getting at with this opening salvo, referring to Watson as a word painter.
Yeah, Conan Doyle was heavily influenced as a boy by the works of Mayne Reid, so-called Colonel Mayne Reid, who was sort of a boys' novelist in the 1840s and 50s, who was very popular. And if you read any of Mayne Reid, one of the things you find is his chapters always open like that, by getting you right in the location. He's got this great practice of describing the scenes, the surrounding, the mountain, the smells, the atmosphere, the color of the light, and so on. And so, I think that's what we're seeing here. And so, in the way Potter puts it, he says, Watson understood the imperative of the master scenic designer. It's not enough to mount the story in an acceptable setting. When the curtain rises, the set must instantly evoke the mood of the play before a word is said. And so every devotee of the canon has in his memory a gallery of Watson's word paintings. And many people have the same picture hanging in their own mental galleries. Stroll with me through mine and let me point out some of my favorites. I hope all of them will be yours too. And to begin with, here are 3 of Watson's quick sketches. Time was short. The tempo of the action permitted no prolonged interruption. The effect must be immediate. The label under the first reads, A Study in Scarlet.
Number 3, Lauriston Gardens wore an ill-omened and minatory look. It looked out with 3 tiers of vacant melancholy windows, which were blank and dreary, save that here and there a "To Let" sign had developed like a cataract upon the bleared panes.
Succinct and deft, is it not? Now, isn't that interesting, the word cataract there? Hanging next to it, says Potter, the old mansion was of gray, lichen-blotched stone, with a high central portion and 2 curving wings like the jaws of a crab. An artful simile reflecting the house's evil, tenacious proprietor, because this, of course, is from the Speckled Band. And the third sketch is from A Scandal in Bohemia.
Irene Adler's villa in St. John's Wood evoked in one word, a bijou of a villa. As Watson sets it down, the word is Holmes's, not his own, but I believe the truth of the matter is that it was Holmes's original estimate of the villa was a blunt, small, revised by Watson to bijou when he had seen it for himself later that day. That's a really nice turn of phrase when you think about it. And you don't often hear of bijou attached to an architectural dwelling.
Yeah. And we move on to the larger canvases. Much frustration has been experienced by scholars in trying to run down the actual locales of the adventures. The usual reason for failure is accepted as Watson's desire to protect his sources. But I believe that it is also Watson's irresistible urge to enhance the mood of his setting rather than just photograph it. If he felt he must forego verisimilitude, like any good painter, he never hesitated. No Andy Warhol's 1,000% accurate tomato soup can for him. Watson would have painted us a soup can with the wrong look, a can to set us brooding, puzzled, and suspicious. And so the first full-size canvas in my collection is The Man with the Twisted Lip.
A long, low room, thick and heavy with the brown opium smoke and terraced with wooden berths, like the forecastle of an emigrant ship. Through the gloom, one could dimly catch a glimpse of bodies, lying in strange, fantastic poses, bowed shoulders, bent knees, heads thrown back, and chins pointing upward, with here and there a dark, lackluster eye turned upon the newcomer. Out of the black shadows there glimmered little red circles of light, now bright, now faint, as the burning poison waxed and waned in the bowls of the metal pipes. Scholars, it is no matter that there was no opium den in Upper Swandam Lane. No Upper Swandam Lane either. London's East End is all the better for Watson's enhancement. It is now, and evermore shall be. And then we turn to the Greek interpreter. The interior of the Myrtles Beckenham calls for ominous mystery. Watson obliges, enhancing Mr. Maylis's original account, I am sure.
A colored gas lamp turned so low that I could see little, save that the hall was of some size and hung with pictures. The room appeared to be very richly furnished, but again the only light was afforded by a single lamp, halfway turned down. The chamber was certainly large, My feet sank into the carpet. I caught glimpses of velvet chairs, a high white marble mantelpiece, what seemed to be a suit of Japanese armor at one side of it, and there was a chair just under the lamp.
And then on to the sign of 4, 2 paintings. The first, Thaddeus Sholto's Sybaritic living room.
In that sorry house, it looked as out of place as a diamond of the first water in a setting of tarnished brass. The richest and glossiest of curtains and tapestries draped the walls, looped back here and there to expose some richly mounted painting or oriental vase. The carpet was amber and black, so soft and so thick that the foot sank pleasantly into it like a bed of moss. 2 great tiger skins thrown athwart it increased the suggestion of Eastern luxury, as did a huge hookah on a mat in the corner. A lamp, in the fashion of a silver dove, was hung from an almost invisible wire in the center of the room, and as it burned it filled the air with a subtle and aromatic odor.
I mean, what a scene setting that is. I mean, you can almost smell the aroma of the incense yourself. You can almost feel the carpet beneath your feet. Watson just does a splendid job of casting his brush across the canvas here.
And then later in the case, the second, says Potter, is a Whistler-esque Thames-side landscape, as seen from the police boat as we passed the city. The last rays of the sun were gilding the cross upon the dome of St. Paul's. Watson's word painting must surely have been the inspiration for G.F. Allen's magnificent photograph, reproduced in the annotated Sherlock Holmes.
And if you're interested in checking that out, the footnote tells us that is in Volume 1 of the Baring Gould annotated Holmes on page 665. Now, in The Hound of the Baskervilles, Potter says he has 2 examples, and in a sense, they're both motion pictures. Oh, this is great, because this gets us into Potter's lifelong career. In the first, the camera is mounted on the wagonette as it leaves the fertile country behind and beneath us, and gives Watson and young Baskerville their first view of that forbidding moor. And it goes, "In the front of us rose the huge expanse of the moor, mottled with gnarled and craggy cairns and tors. A cold wind swept down from it and set us shivering. The grim suggestiveness of the barren waste, the chilling wind, and the darkling sky. The road grew bleaker and wilder over huge russet and olive slopes sprinkled with giant boulders. Suddenly, we looked down into a cup-like depression, patched with stunted oaks and firs which had been twisted and bent by the fury of years of storm. 2 high, narrow towers rose over the trees. The driver pointed with his whip. 'Baskerville Hall,' said he. Its master has risen and was staring with flushed cheek and shining eyes. A few minutes later, we reached the lodge gates, a maze of fantastic tracery and wrought iron, with weather-bitten pillars on either side, blotched with lichens. The lodge was a ruin of black granite and bared ribs of rafters. We passed into the avenue where the wheels were hushed amid the leaves, and the old trees shot their branches in a somber tunnel over our heads. Baskerville shuddered as he looked up the long drive to where the house glimmered like a ghost at the farther end."
And then also in The Hound, the other, says Potter, is a landscape by moonlight. The camera is fixed. The only movement is that of the heavy fog as it advances on Stapleton's cottage from Grimpen Mire. It was drifting slowly in our direction and banked itself up like a wall on that side of us, low but thick and well-defined. The moon shone on it, and it looked like a great shimmering ice field, with the heads of the distant tors as rocks borne upon its surface. Every minute that white, woolly plain, which covered one half of the moor, was drifting closer and closer to the house. Already the first thin wisps of it were curling across the golden square of the lighted window. The farther wall of the orchard was already invisible, and the trees were standing out of a swirl of white vapor. As we watched it, the fog wreaths came crawling around both corners of the house and rolled slowly into one dense bank, on which the upper floor and the roof floated like a strange ship upon a shadowy sea.
And here Potter takes us to what he considers Watson's best single setting, the Reichenbach Falls. Although he had, of course, the actual falls for model, the many photographs and reams of reports from faithful pilgrims to attest to the fact that Watson had indeed transcended the impressive enough reality. And here we turn to Watson's description. It is indeed a fearsome place. The torrent plunges into a tremendous abyss from which the spray rolls up like the smoke from a burning house. The shaft into which the river hurls itself is an immense cavern lined with glistening coal-black rock and narrowing into a creaming, boiling pit of incalculable depth. The long sweep of green water roaring forever down, and the thick flickering curtain of spray hissing forever upwards turn a man giddy. And very possibly, he says, the Reichenbach Falls occupies the preeminent position in the galleries of all Holmesian enthusiasts. A rash statement, perhaps, but I believe it will resist serious challenge.
There are others in my collection, notably the Manor House at Burlstone, Poldhu Bay and the Cornish Moors, the crypt at Shoscombe Old Place. Good as these are, to me they have lesser impact. Actually, after the final problem, the word paintings begin to dwindle until in the casebook there is none worth memorializing. I find this most interesting in the light of serious doubts that have been raised by revered canonical scholars who question the canonicity of the casebook in its entirety. Might not the lack in this collection of any of Watson's word paintings be another spoke in that wheel?
Another oddity. We have no complete word painting for the setting we all know and love the best, 221B Baker Street. Watson's content to give us the sometimes contradictory details of the suite in driblets scattered throughout the saga. But exactly what it looked like as a whole, indeed exactly where it was, is still somewhat theoretical. Baring Gould's charming chapter in the annotated is in fact only a compendium of canonical controversy, hedged with many we thinks, might have beens, may have beens, and assumings. The only comfortable attitude to take would seem to be Pirandello's. Right you are, if you think you are. To each his own picture, let that suffice.
At the far end of my gallery hangs my favorite, a perfect example of what I choose to call instant mood. Although this word painting has really nothing to do with the adventure it introduces, I'll wager that when the name of Sherlock Holmes is mentioned, something of this particular picture will come to mind, even if only subconsciously. Of all the beginnings of all the adventures, this is the perfect overture. It was a wild, tempestuous night towards the close of November. Holmes and I sat together in silence all evening. He engaged with a powerful lens deciphering the remains of the original inscription upon a palimpsest. I deep in a recent treatise upon surgery. Outside, the wind howled down Baker Street while the rain beat fiercely against the windows. It was strange there, in the very depths of town, with 10 miles of man's handiwork on every side of us, to feel the iron grip of nature and to be conscious that To the huge elemental forces, all London was no more than the molehills that dot the fields. I walked to the window and looked out on the deserted street. The occasional lamps gleamed on the expanse of muddy road and shining pavement. A single cab was splashing its way from the Oxford Street end. That's from the Golden Pince-Nez.
Yes. And that's how it ends. What a lovely scene on which to end. So what do you think? Did Potter capture what we know intimately but have seldom acknowledged here?
Oh, I think so. It's wonderful that he assembled these great examples. And as we enjoy the cases of Sherlock Holmes and talk about them on this program and others, I love it when we pull out these examples of beautiful writing. And I think he really does. He also underscores the fact that how sad it is that we never got to see a Sherlock Holmes film directed by Henry C. Potter. Can you imagine what he would have done?
That's a good point.
With,
I think he would have
Holmes
done well
on the screen. Yeah.
And here's one last thought I think that's worth dwelling on. After you've read the canon more than once, and you become familiar with the characters, familiar with the plots, familiar with the settings, it's awfully easy to glide over some of these truly artful paragraphs and descriptions, and going back and dwelling on it a little bit, and seemingly viewing the stories as a first-timer once again, truly brings out the beauty in Watson's storytelling.
And that is not a trifle.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Please join us again next week for another installment of Trifles. Show notes are available on SherlockHolmesPodcast.com. Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and be sure to check out our longer show, I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, where we interview notable Sherlockians and share news of the Sherlockian world.
You've taken my breath away, Mr. Holmes.
Please vanish, both of you.